There are 1,000,000 ways to die. We just wanna talk about it. CodeHeads.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to CodeHeads. We're back at it. We took a brief 250th hiatus, and now we're back.
Yeah, some much needed rest after cranking out so many episodes this past 9 months, right? So we really are coming back with some fervor today, and we're excited to bring you this episode.
Yeah, so you'll see that we have a third square here, like Hollywood squares, and it's a real resuscitation celebrity. We have David Hiltz. Welcome, David. Are you looking for the celebrity? So, for those of you guys who don't know, David is a highly respected voice in emergency cardiovascular care and resuscitation. Over the course of close to 4 decades, which he probably doesn't want to hear, he has built a career around. Really, his career has been focused on one true mission, and that is improving the chances that more people survive sudden cardiac arrest. And he may disagree with me, so feel free to disagree, Dave. But he spent nearly 20 years with the American Heart Association. He did a lot of work with the education and implementation and strategy development, and then worked with Code One Training Solutions, really strengthening training, innovation, and response systems. And I have known Dave for quite a while, and I know him personally. And I think what makes Dave's perspective so valuable, that we wanted to bring him on here today, and we've been wanting to bring him for a while, is that he's seen resuscitation, over the years and from multiple angles, from an educator, a strategist, an innovator, a volunteer, a leader, and, back in the day, EMS, and he's continued to, bring his voice and work with, the Citizens for CPR Foundation. And his work has consistently centered, on how do we make sure that people are ready, willing, and able to save a life when seconds count. So I'm very excited to have Dave on here today and have him enter the CodeHeads conversation. He brings a mix of experience, passion, practical insight, and usually some snide remarks to improve cardiac arrest survival and help us all build a better system of care. So welcome, Dave.
Well, deep breath. Right? That's incredibly flattering and tall order, right?
Yeah.
But Michael, Bridget, thank you for having me on. Love the show and glad to be here. Again, thank you for the really wonderful introduction. My mother certainly would be very proud. Just a quick disclaimer, kind of the only official card that I carry, and the reason why I'm here is, I'm the official old person. So
I have one too.
AARP.
I brought my AARP card, and so the statements and opinion that I may share here, that's why they brought me on, are my own. And, I've had the opportunity and distinct privilege to work with a lot of world-class organizations, and I don't want any of the things that I may say reflect negatively on them. These are all my own. And, what an incredible kind of topic, right? Resuscitation, past, present, future. It's kind of always back to the future, right? If you hang around long enough, it's like things kind of have they tend to recur, right? But they're not always the same. So I'm really looking forward to having the two of you expertly guide me through some valuable discussion around this subject, with the intention that when we learn things, when we discover information, that we use that information to improve.
Right. So, yeah, we've had, in the past, we've had podcasts on the history of CPR, the history of AEDs, kind of, really looking at where things started, like maybe a little harebrained idea, and then it took off and exploded, and took, in some cases, hundreds of years to really take off, but it took time and people dropping things and coming back at it and then looking at it from a different angle. I think in modern day resuscitation, with every 5 years, we have an update in the science. And so there's always little tweaks and changes. And then it seems like every 10 years, the resuscitation guidelines kind of have a bigger overhaul. So Mike and I've worked together really closely during some of those to implement them together when we were working together, really make these big changes, what are these little small changes. But despite all that, there's always something that's, there's always something that has been done in the past and is coming back. So, the OGs of resuscitation are always like, oh yeah, we did that 20 years ago. But it might be, kind of like new for us because, despite doing this for a while, we don't have that, 40 years under our belt. But are there any trends or any innovations that you're seeing or that you've seen in the past that maybe you thought were going to really be a stakeholder, whether it's, a change in the way we educate or a resuscitation device, in the past that you thought was like, yes, this is going to make it, and maybe it just didn't for some reason? Or vice versa, if there's something that you're like, what a dud. And then it ended up being something that we use with frequency now.
Do you mind if I ask one particular, like we're talking about device or any sort of technology that might be incorporated into our CPR protocol or procedures? Because I saw we had an email going and you mentioned, or I just saw some notes on minimally invasive direct cardiac massage. And I read about that device, never knew about it. And it was interesting, and it was, this elegant device, but it seems quite resource intensive, maybe invasive. And I love the idea. We're always trying to increase cardiac output, right? We're only getting about a third of our baseline with external, but the idea of going inside I was kind of like, whoa, who can do that? So anyway, since I did see you write a little bit about that, I would like your opinion on that, as one that didn't make it.
All right. So this is the part of the show when I say, hey, thanks a lot. I've got to go. Right. Some really big questions and comments there. So, if I may, the two of you know me, so I tend to redirect a lot, right? I take a lot of liberty. It kind of comes with holding that, AARP card, right? So Bridget talks about the science, right? And I think it's real important to embrace the science, right? That it's always changing, but that it's our job to challenge the science, right? And, there's accidental discoveries in here. And, it's really funny to hang around with kind of scientifically oriented people. It's like, this is the science. And, sometimes you have to remind people that science isn't necessarily the truth, right? It's like, wait, what? The science isn't the truth? No, it really represents the best that we know right now, today. And that could change tomorrow, right? And so, you can introduce a little tongue-in-cheek humor here, like, what's the difference between scientists and magicians? Magicians know why their stuff works, right? So, again, it's our job to kind of revisit all of these things. And sometimes timing is everything, right? And so something that may have failed in the past, you can't be an old sacred cow and say, we tried this before and therefore it cannot work now, right? Circumstances change. This is why you got to be kind of, you have to have a little wisdom as an older person, right? Who's experienced a number of different things, because timing, like epinephrine, right? I mean, we could introduce something that just goes back and forth and back and forth, you know. Is the trick to epinephrine, timing, right? Now, where do, if we look at where the real payouts are, right, from a business perspective, it's that, early detection. We just don't know, right? We don't know when it happens. It happens during sleep. It goes undetected, right? How can we use smart technology like biosensing devices and machine learning to deliver customized treatment, right? We talked about smart defibrillators back in the 1980s that would determine, like, essentially if you had a completely ATP depleted myocardium in VF, you would institute some other type of therapy in advance before you deliver a shock, because of the potential of perhaps a terminal post-defibrillation asystole or something like that, right? So, again, the science becomes really, really important. I see Bridget is making body movements. She wants to say something.
Yes, I do. Well, I wanted to interject. I was waiting for you to take a breath. So I think that's, a great point about the a lot of great points, but I think a great point about the science is, it is the best we have right at that moment. And, whenever, I think people sometimes forget that whenever you're going into any sort of clinical research or any research ever, any science, you always have a hypothesis. So you're always kind of biased a little bit in your brain. You think, oh, I'm going to test this and this is what's going to happen. This is what it's going to show. And when a lot of the research that comes out, especially with like timing of, epi and like some of these different drugs that they use. And when you go to, the AHA's conferences, a lot of the initial posters and a lot of these like ideas that are coming and they're just starting to work on are all done on pigs, are done in labs, are not, done on real people, like who might be sleeping and have a sudden cardiac arrest. So yeah, EMS gets there and gives them epi within 2 minutes. Is the epi like detrimental at that point? Probably not, but like, is it super helpful? I don't know, because God only knows how long this person has been, asystolic by the time they get to them. There's so much of this emphasis on the timing once we arrive, but, that's where the science doesn't always match the reality. And I do think people forget that a little bit, is that, it's nearly impossible to create these scenarios and test them like as they are.
Yeah. Excellent points, right? It's like, it all looks so simple, right? Particularly way back when you were, young. It all seems so simple, right? But it's complicated. Right. So, research and resuscitation, particularly in the United States, is like kind of not so easy. Right. There's a number of hurdles. And, sometimes you look to do a correlation, right? Oh, this seems to be correlated with good outcome, but gosh, we missed the mark on causation, right? Which is it of these variables? And, pediatric resuscitation, not with my kid, you're not. There's a lot of stuff, right? Informed consent. But the science becomes, again, the cornerstone of what we're doing. Of course, there's the interpretation component, which is always kind of an Achilles heel, right? An organization might make a statement about a particular intervention, whether it's a drug or a compression rate or a mechanical device, whatever it may be, and it could be misinterpreted. The kingdom on the hill says we must do this, And that was never really their intent. But once something gets out the gate like that, it's really hard to kind of reel it back in.
Right.
So communicating this kind of stuff is really difficult. And given the way that people take in their information and communicate it from one another, it's very easy for misinformation to get out there, right?
Yep.
Or something that might be accurate, but it's like they're missing the point, right?
Yeah.
So,
and then people will take that and run with it, like people
correct, right?
And then change all of their protocols, like the sky is falling and it's like, whoa.
Yeah, they rush.
Bring that back, once somebody has something in their head that's how they interpret it, that's how they read it, and they make all these changes, they're doing it, and it's tough. It's tough to get them to like, whoa.
Yeah, and the headier the newsprint, right, about the potential intervention, it seems like it's even more desirable, right? So if this is something that can move us from the health pages to the front pages of the newspaper, this becomes, right? So kind of some of the more... There's a lot going on here. And so we tend to gravitate towards kind of shiny things, right? Some might call it the flavor of the week, right? Whether it's a particular device, particular therapy, whatever it may be. And, Michael brings up the minimally invasive direct cardiac massage, right? So best way to move the blood, pronto quick is probably, open up the chest, reach in, manually squeeze, right? But it takes a certain amount of equipment and skill and everything else to do that and make it like a reasonable idea to do, right? I mean, I couldn't do that, right? I wouldn't want to do that, right? So along comes, and again, as a resuscitation community, because you're really dealing with like the Grim Reaper, right? Like you look in there, your side view mirror, and there he is, right? Complete with the cloak and the sickle and the everything. You're like life preservers. That is what you do in resuscitation, right? And so it's easy to get excited about things, right? There are some deeply rooted problems. And again, on the surface, minimally invasive, right? Through an incision, direct cardiac massage, minimal training, right? Minimal resources, Johnny on the spot, do it right away. Wow, this sounds great. I mean, without naming names, I'll say some very familiar names in resuscitation. We're very excited about it. And I'll tell you, when people like that get excited about it, it's infectious, right? There's a lot of hope for things. And so you look at the hope list, and it's like, not the hopeless, the hope list, okay? High dose epinephrine, heminophilin for asystole, right? There's a long list of kind of things that we thought were gonna be a magic bullet. And so we're always looking for that magic bullet or the secret sauce, right? And so devices and pharmacologic agents and therapies, sexy therapies, float to the top, like cream, right? These are where we're going to focus. And meanwhile, the fundamental things that have existed from the beginning, if we look at almost 70 years ago now, we look at those old Baltimore guidelines, a lot of the content in those original guidelines are the same and have been reaffirmed and reaffirmed and reaffirmed, but yet we haven't sorted out kind of educational kind of challenges and kind of this more newly embraced area of implementation science. So I'll stop there to see if I'm making any sense.
Yeah. And I think, I think that's what, when I teach, and I know Mike as well, and, when I speak, about different topics related to resuscitation, I always kind of bring it back to, there are all these things, right? But really the only things ever proven and continuously proven and have never been second guessed about saving lives are high quality CPR and early defibrillation for, pulseless VF and pulses, VTAC, and VF. Like those are the, that's the mainstay and that's the basis. And, working together with good communication, because the drugs do change. Some of the devices that we use change, but, what we're doing and the mainstay is the patient and doing the compressions and trying to get them out of that arrhythmia. And I do think that the reason that people come up with, ideas for whether it's, a device or, a different way of doing medications is because of their experience. And so, and so sometimes that puts blinders on you, I know that people come to us, and I know this has happened to you, Dave, over the years, like, hey, you guys know a lot about resuscitation. Can you check out this new device that we have that we're bringing to market, and it's really going to save so many lives? And if you look at it in a vacuum, you're like, oh, I mean, yeah, that's a great idea. Like, cool. But then as you start to take steps out and realize the logistics, like the cost per use, and like what actually is the benefit, like who would be actually using this? Like, there's all sorts of different things. And like, then you start to look at, as you take the steps back, like what actually is the benefit? Like that is taking time away.
And you and I saw one recently. I won't name names, but it was neat if you're just going to look at it in and of itself, but it didn't have anything to do with the two most important, interventions for arrest, like you just cited, which is defibrillation and compressions. So if I'm going to get all obsessed, it was an airway device of sorts. So if I'm going to get all obsessed with this airway device and put all this time and effort into it and really emphasize it as part of my resuscitation process, and airway is relevant. I don't mean to discount it, but I'd rather see, development in those two interventions itself, right? So you could say automated compression devices. You could say, I don't want to talk about DSED, but those are ideas that are being floated around. So, right. I mean, that's where my intrigue lies. But I do like neato devices. I do like seeing these kind of cool things, no matter respiratory or otherwise. But then again, I need to apply. Is it relevant? Is it effective? Oh, right? Boy. Does it make sense? Is it white noise? Right. So
can we do something with this?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. That was the failure of, that minimally invasive device. It's like, wow, this is kind of involved. This isn't going to work. But, again, like multi-dimensional thinking here, if we can kind of wander into this, is like that kind of work ultimately led to, active compression, decompression CPR, then kind of moved on to piston type mechanical CPR, right? Which isn't a magic bullet, but has applications given certain circumstances. And then we come back to the science and the art and the magic and all this other stuff, right? So, again, it's like really complicated, but Bridget makes a salient point, and you reaffirm, Michael, the importance of the person right beside that person, not the bystander, but the lay rescuer witness. And, there are so many problems with detection, that, we need to tech our way out of that. Right. I just firmly believe that somehow we need to tech our way out of that. So once we can determine, right, so whether it's an accelerometer change or some kind of thing, I don't know, that's not what I do. But if we can know that somebody has fallen on the floor and they're not moving, immediate detection and then immediate assessment and immediate, everything we can do to compress that first therapy, whether that's CPR or, medication, is whatever. Waving a magic wand, being like Dr. McCoy in Star Trek and waving something over, right? Well, that first therapy and shoring up, a customized treatment using things like AI and things of that nature.
Well, and I think that, there are those things are already created, like in, Apple Watches. It will it detects when I fall or if something, and it will automatically call actually 911 the other day. I didn't realize that it thought I fell. Not. I was playing with my kids and jumped off a big rock, but it thought I fell because I guess I slammed hard enough. And so it was like, did you take a fall? And so it was like calling emergency services because I didn't respond fast enough. And I was like, oh my God, cancel. But so I think the good thing is that there are some features in different, and this was not created as a medical device, right? This is just for people to count steps and do other sorts of things, but it has now integrated to the point that it can do an EKG for you. It can, if you're feeling palpitations, you can check, not that the layperson, knows what to see, but share it with your provider. And, it can detect falls. It can help to, automatically get emergency services, which is, the first step of the chain of survival is recognition. And then from there, kind of focusing. And I know we've kind of covered a lot. But I do have a question about, because you have been very embedded with education and, and kind of changing that, innovating with education. So what do you see as one of the best innovations or changes in education of, for CPR and, whether it's BLS, ACLS, CPR. What do you think has been one of the biggest changes or innovations in education related to that?
Wow. Who agreed? Who agreed for me to do this again?
Well, just a quick
that's
one.
A good one. That's a good one. So better, right? Better innovation, better, right?
Better is better.
By what measure? Right. So, interestingly, I kind of gave some thought to this in advance. And, what's better about education? Well, I'm not sure. Right. But I will say this, that without mistake, I think that consistency in education has improved significantly. So big kudos for, increasing consistency. Have we made it more accessible? Yes, I think we've made it more accessible. More and more people are being trained, more and more money being, put into that type of training. But, there's a big but there. I think we're still really missing the mark, right? And we place way too much value on certification versus learning.
Right.
And having a culture of helping others in their ultimate time of need. And I think we've got a long way to go to really, truly be accessible and affordable to people of all races and color and economic background and so forth. And I think we've got a long way to go there. Additionally, I'd say that we've probably gotten very good. No, I'd say we've gotten very good at assessing our ability to deliver education and meet learning objectives, but I'm not certain we're really good or have the evidence that we'd like to have that, provides not just a correlation, but a causation to high performance in real life. I think the gap there is really significant. And so I would say that in some cases, what we're doing is an excellent and efficient means to achieve certification.
Yeah.
But I'd say if I were asked to put all my money down on one number and say, is this the best way to prepare somebody to actually rescue somebody? I'd say, I don't know as if I'd want to make that bet.
And that's a really valuable point because, especially being in healthcare and, EMS, it's like we have to have our certifications. And so, people go through the motions to get their certification cards so that they can keep their job and maintain, their, licensure and all this other stuff that they have to. But yeah, it's a piece of paper. And that doesn't mean just because I can pass a class and get my certification card doesn't mean I'm not going to freeze when, a patient goes down, or that I'm going to do high quality CPR every time, or know how to, defibrillate, or have the algorithms in my head. or be able to communicate that to others. And I think one of the biggest pieces with, I think really in the world, I think that people aren't necessarily great communicators, always, especially in chaotic events such as a sudden cardiac arrest. And I think that's one of the pieces of education is learning how to communicate and what to communicate. You know, in an event, you don't want just keep it short and simple, like who's doing what role and what do we need? And, you know, if you're the team leader, does anybody have any suggestions? But
never mind that it's probably the scariest thing that ever happened to that person, right? It's like, why did I get out of bed today, right? Why did this happen to me, right? Why did this happen to somebody important to me, right? So when you start looking at the dynamics of what's happening, in the vast majority of cases, it's like the worst day for a whole bunch of people.
See,
and there's a lot of dynamics there.
You mentioned accessibility, and I know we're short on time, but one thing that I'm impassioned, and I know Bridget is as well, is creating initiatives to bring them into the training into the communities that where there is disparity of care. And disparity of care was emphasized in the last guidelines that came out in October from the AHA. So I'm not just also talking about communities that are underserved and don't, you know, have this access as much as others. There's also institutions. There's schools locally here. I'm trying to offer free CPR and I'm getting pushback on it by these. I really do want to cite the school in a way, but I'm offering my time, my equipment to teach the entire high school. And I'll keep pushing because we're talking about the lay rescuer. So not a BLS research, not an ACLS research, but to me, it's, and I don't know how you can make any argument otherwise, truly. Like, it is essential that we have more people trained to respond, the lay rescuer, and they don't need a piece of paper. I mean, they really don't. They just need to have just an idea, a concept of what to do. Because what I always tell them in terms of empowerment is, hey, as an ACLS provider, as a medic, the first thing I'm doing when someone's down is the same thing you can do, right? In the immediacy of the event. That's pretty cool. And that really makes them be like, really? I don't have to wait for the ambulance just to get something started. And I'm like, well, if you wait, it's a problem. So I think, when you said accessibility, just boop, that's how I think of it.
I think to your point, Mike, like I was hoping with the guideline changes, like the guideline emphasizing that and that it would get hospitals. I know that healthcare is a whole thing and, you know, money and blah, blah, blah. However, I was hoping that, you know, different funding opportunities, whether federal level, state level, you know, hospitals themselves who have relationships with different schools and, you know, who already have to, you know, academic medical centers do have an obligation to do a certain amount of, you know, have community involvement. I was really hoping that they might put some kind of muscle behind that, put some money behind it, and just, you know, they don't have to give, you know, it doesn't have to be the cost of certification cards, but, you know, the cost of sending some staff for, you know, a day or 2 days, or even inviting schools onto, you know, the campus to come and just have a learning day and you know, would be pretty cool. And, you know, obviously people are still implementing some of the changes from the guidelines, but, you know, all I can hope for is that when the guidelines come out, that people are really looking at that and taking it to heart. Because I know you and I were so excited to see that focus on the great disparities of care. Yes. You know, we want to make sure we get, you know, training and education and support out to those areas. But I don't know. I don't think it's hit everyone yet. Yes, Steve.
So how many elephants can you guys fit into one room in one session of your fantastic program? This is kind of like the discussions that really need to occur. And these are rock solid kind of palpable issues, right? And so, and shout outs to like a whole bunch of pioneers. I was just thinking of Dr. Deeb Salem in the Boston area, who very early in my career talked about kind of the importance of treating youth, and, Frank Pantridge and Paul Zoll, and it's just a long list of people who have just done extraordinary work. But, one of the things that you're looking at, Michael, with the school is that how do we get to youth? And sometimes, going forward with, your intent is met with, we don't understand why the resistance, right? And so sometimes we need to look at this as, rather than training students in life-saving CPR, we're providing them with a skill-based experience that will help them be better human beings. Sometimes, again, it's like timing, positioning, all this other stuff. And again, if we look a little bit deeper, if we look culturally, in other parts of the world, we see that in Asian countries, for instance, they're using toys to introduce young people to desirable civilian and cultural behaviors, like small defibrillators and like bubble case vending machines. And so we've got a lot to learn from one another. But regretfully, despite the fact that we are more globally connected than we have ever been before, we remain isolated from one another. And for a host of different reasons, we are not mixing it up. We are not sharing information. And so this is where there is a bright and wonderful future, right? Where we can embrace the idea of we've got a whole lot to learn, and that we can learn from one another and not be insular or stay in our cylinders of excellence, our silos, as we frequently refer to them as. And again, you guys have the greatest show, and I'm so happy to be able to spend time with the two of you today. I don't know how we are for time or where you want to go.
Yeah, well, I was just about to, say that I think you're ending us on a great note in that, this is, we do need to share ideas. We do need to have people talk about things. And that's why we have this show, because Mike and I talk about stuff, and then people will write in and share their experiences and their thoughts. And that's why we have people on, why we're bringing guests on, because we want to, on some of the topics, because we want people to, we want to information share. We want people to talk about what they're doing, some innovations, what they think helps, and where we think we can go. And this has been great having you,
Yes,
come on and talk with us and share some of your knowledge over your many years. And so thank you for being here with us. And thank you guys all for, being your code heads. Remember to reach out and touch us. If you have any questions, you have any thoughts, bring them towards us, and we will see you guys next time.
There are 1 million ways to die. We just wanna talk